Imagine a story written thousands of years ago, preserved through generations, whispered in prayers, and carried in the hearts of a scattered people. A story that spoke of exile, of suffering, of wandering through foreign lands, and yet promised a return, a rebirth, a future that seemed impossible. For centuries, those words were read as distant dreams, as poetry from another time. And then, in the span of a single moment in history, the impossible became reality. Today, we ask a question that has stirred believers, scholars, and nations alike. Asterisk was the return of Israel, the fulfillment of biblical prophecy in our own time. Asterisk, to explore this, is to step into one of the greatest mysteries of faith and history. It is to witness how the survival of a people, against all odds, has captured the attention of the world. And it is to consider whether ancient prophecies are not just relics of the past, but living words that continue to shape our present and our future. Stay with me, because this journey is not just about Israel. It is about hope, destiny, and the possibility that we are seeing history and prophecy converge before our very eyes. When we speak of ancient prophecies, we are referring to passages in the Hebrew Bible that foretold the return of the Jewish people to their land after long periods of exile. The prophet Ezekiel in chapter 37 describes a vision of dry bones coming back to life, symbolizing the nation of Israel being restored from death, like dispersion to renewed strength. Isaiah 66 speaks of a nation being born in a single day, a poetic image often linked to the sudden declaration of Israel's independence in 1948. Jeremiah 30 and 31 contain promises that God would gather his people from the nations where they had been scattered and bring them back to the land of their fathers. Amos 9, 14-15 declares that once restored, Israel would never again be uprooted from its land. These words were written thousands of years ago, long before the destruction of the Second Temple, long before the scattering of the Jewish people throughout the world, and yet they carried a vision of hope and restoration. To many believers, these scriptures are not merely historical writings, but living words that anticipated a future reality, forming the foundation for understanding the modern return of Israel as a prophetic event. The scattering of the Jewish people is one of the most remarkable and tragic stories in human history, and many view it as the unfolding of ancient warnings recorded in Scripture. In 70 C, after a long and brutal siege, the Romans destroyed Jerusalem and the Second Temple, forcing countless Jews into slavery and exile. This was followed by further expulsions after the Bar Kokhba revolt in 135 CE, when the Romans renamed the land and attempted to erase Jewish identity from it. Over the centuries, Jewish communities spread across Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, and eventually the Americas, often living as minorities under foreign rule, facing persecution, pogroms, and exile from one land to another. The Bible had spoken of this dispersion in passages such as Deuteronomy 28, which warned of scattering among the nations if Israel turned from its covenant. Despite the hardships, the Jewish people preserved their traditions, scriptures, and language, holding onto the hope of return to Zion. This endurance across nearly 2 millennia of displacement is seen by many as both a judgment and a preparation for eventual restoration, keeping alive the prophetic expectation that one day the people would be gathered back to their homeland. The rebirth of Israel in 1948 stands as one of the most extraordinary events of the modern era, and is often regarded as a direct fulfillment of biblical promises. After centuries of exile, persecution, and suffering, including the horrors of the Holocaust, the Jewish people returned to their ancestral land and declared the establishment of the State of Israel on May 14, 1948. For many, this moment echoed the words of Isaiah, who spoke of a nation being born in a single day, and the visions of prophets like Ezekiel, who foresaw the regathering of a scattered people. The Declaration of Independence was not only a political milestone, but also a spiritual turning point, as countless believers around the world recognized it as the realization of ancient prophecies. What makes this event even more striking is the improbability of a dispersed people maintaining their identity, language, and faith for nearly 2,000 years, only to reemerge as a sovereign state in their historic homeland. The establishment of Israel was immediately met with resistance from surrounding nations, yet its very survival and recognition became a testament to resilience and determination, feeding into the belief that divine prophecy was unfolding in the eyes of the world. The survival of Israel against all odds has become one of the strongest arguments for those who believe its modern existence is tied to divine prophecy. From the very day it declared independence in 1948, Israel was surrounded by armies from multiple Arab nations intent on its destruction. Outnumbered and outgunned, the new state managed to secure victory and establish its sovereignty. The same pattern repeated in 1967 during the Six-Day War, when Israel faced a coalition of neighboring countries, yet emerged with a swift and decisive triumph, gaining control of Jerusalem, the West Bank, Gaza, and the Golan Heights. Again in 1973, during the Yom Kippur War, Israel was caught by surprise, facing overwhelming assaults on multiple fronts, but managed to turn the tide and survive. To many observers, these repeated victories defied military logic, strengthening the belief that a higher power was preserving the nation just as the prophets had foretold. Beyond the battlefield, Israel's survival also reflects its ability to thrive economically, technologically, and culturally in a hostile region. The continued existence and flourishing of Israel, despite repeated threats of annihilation, are seen by believers as a living testimony of God's promises to protect and restore His people. Many people interpret the return of Israel as a central sign of the times, connecting it to prophecies that point toward the end of the age. In the Gospels, Jesus spoke of Jerusalem being trampled by the nations until the time of the Gentiles was fulfilled, a passage some see as linked to the Jewish people regaining control of their land. Ezekiel and Zechariah describe future conflicts in which nations gather against Israel, with Jerusalem standing at the center of world attention. Today, the city is not only the religious heart of Judaism, but also a focal point of international politics, contested by many and watched by all. Global conflicts, alliances shifting in the Middle East, and ongoing debates over sovereignty in Jerusalem are often interpreted as echoes of these ancient predictions. Advances in technology, rapid changes in warfare, and worldwide unrest are also tied by some interpreters to biblical descriptions of the last days, where knowledge would increase and nations would reign. The fact that Israel, a small nation, plays such an outsized role in global affairs fuels the belief that its restoration is not simply a political reality, but a prophetic marker signaling that larger events are still to come. The question of whether the modern state of Israel represents a literal fulfillment of biblical prophecy or a symbolic one has stirred ongoing debates among scholars, theologians, and believers. Some argue that the physical return of the Jewish people to their ancestral homeland after nearly 2,000 years aligns precisely with passages in Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and Isaiah that speak of restoration from exile. They see the rebirth of Israel in 1948 and the regathering of millions of Jews from around the world as undeniable evidence of God's promises being fulfilled in a concrete, historical way. Others, however, take a more symbolic or spiritual approach, suggesting that the true fulfillment of prophecy is not tied to modern nation states, but to the spiritual renewal of God's people as a whole, regardless of geography. Within Christianity, this debate extends into differing views of eschatology, with some holding that Israel must play a central role in the events leading to the end times, while others interpret the promises as fulfilled in the church. Even within Judaism, perspectives vary, with some religious groups embracing the state as divinely ordained, while others remain skeptical. This diversity of interpretation shows how layered and complex the question of prophecy truly is. In looking at the return of Israel, we are not simply reflecting on a political development or a historical accident, but on something that reaches into the deepest layers of faith, prophecy, and destiny. From the ancient words of the prophets to the scattering of a people across the world, from the unimaginable suffering of exile to the dramatic rebirth of a nation in a single day, the story of Israel continues to stand as one of the most powerful narratives of our time. For some, it is the clearest evidence that biblical prophecy is alive and unfolding before our eyes. For others, it remains a subject of interpretation and debate. But regardless of where one stands, the return of Israel challenges us to consider the weight of history, the mystery of faith, and the possibility that the events of our age carry far greater meaning than we may realize. Thank you for joining in this reflection, and may you carry forward wisdom, curiosity, and hope as you continue your own journey of understanding. Good luck, and may peace and clarity guide your path always.